Got Bianca Caban from Republic on the podcast. Bianca, how's it going?
It's great. I'm so happy to be here, James. Thanks
Uh,
for having
I'm
me.
happy you're here, and you work for Republic, which is a company that was on the last time I interviewed a bunch of podcast row entrepreneurs. Republic, maybe you describe it, but it's one of
Sure.
my favorite companies in the world. I've known of them since they started. I've met the CEO
Ken,
Ken,
exactly.
and why don't you describe what they do? Because I think it's very exciting.
Definitely. So, Republic is an investment platform. We allow everyone, regardless of their net worth or accreditation status, to invest in top startups online. And on the other side, from the founder perspective, we allow founders to raise capital from everyone, their customers, their users, etc.
So in some ways, it's like a stock exchange for private companies.
Exactly.
So if I have a good idea and I want to raise money for my company, I don't have to make 1,000 calls to venture capitalists or whatever. I can put my company on your platform, Republic's platform,
Yes.
and then other investors who go to Republic to invest, uh, say, I like this company, and they can invest in my company.
Exactly.
Now, is there any standards of quality? Like, what if I wanna start, a portal for left-handed sports lovers? Can I just post it on Republic?
So that's a good question. We're kind of dual mission. We One of our missions is to provide access to the top tech deals to everyday people, everyday
How do you
retail
know what a
investors.
top tech deal is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we do is we look at a diligence kind of checklist, which is kind of similar to what you would imagine an early stage investor would look at. So things such as traction, because we do want to make sure the most viable business opportunities are on our platform. So when and the majority of our companies are tech enabled or in the tech space. And so we look at things such as month over month user growth, size of user base, customer base, the how often customers and users are coming back, how often are they sort of engaged every single month, things like revenue and revenue growth. So we do look at business metrics like those to make sure we understand that the company is a viable business opportunity that we're
A
presenting to investors.
and are these usually the first rounds of investment that these companies are getting?
Not necessarily. So I would say I think around 20%, maybe more of our companies have received some sort of either venture backing when, as it relates to angels or institutional investors. And so, or they've participated in a sort of prestigious accelerator program like Techstars or Y Combinator.
And
And
why do they go on Republic instead of calling venture capitalists or going on Angel List? So Republic, from what I understand, it's with many companies, you have to be what's called an accredited investor. You have to have a certain net worth or make a certain salary. With
right.
Republic, you don't have to be accredited. How do they break that rule?
Yeah. So we are a compliant platform. So we're SEC regulated and FINRA licensed. And a little over 2 years ago, the SEC passed this law called Title III of the Jobs Act, which allowed for non accredited investors to also invest in startups. And so, as it relates to Republic, the reason why a company would come to us and raise with us is because there are a few reasons. What the crowd can give you is something that a traditional sort of VC investor can't, which is product feedback, brand loyalty, ambassadors. And there are studies that show that when someone invests in a stock like Pepsi, let's say, they are much more likely to be loyal, brands loyal to that product or service.
So
And
would
so
you say most of these companies are B2C, like for consumers?
a lot are. A lot of our companies are B2C. A lot of our companies are really exciting products. And but also we also have a use case for B2B companies. So with B2B companies, one exciting it's sort of a growth hack, right? So it's a great way to build awareness of your company and market your company if you're B2B. So we just had a company raise with us called Sapient, which is an IoT device that helps companies and businesses manage their energy use more efficiently.
Oh, I've
And
heard about this
yeah,
company.
so they just raised a 1,070,000, which is the max you can raise.
So what was the valuation? So just so people
Yes,
know, valuation is what everybody's valuing your company at.
exactly. So I believe that I'll have to actually come back to you on the valuation for that specific company, but on average, our valuations tend to be between 5 and 7 million, which is sort of in line with kind of seed stage
So
companies.
do you mind if I ask you a bunch of like bullet questions just to kind of
Yes,
measure the progress of Republic.
Yeah.
So, how many active investors are looking at Republic and looking for deals at Republic?
Yes, we have around 200,000 active
Wow.
investors.
Okay, and then how many deals would you say get funded?
We have around a probably higher than 95% success rate of deals that successfully complete
Wow,
campaigns.
that's great too. And then the kind of critical question for me, and it might be too early to say, is how many how many investors have been successful investing with Republic companies? Meaning they invested, and
Yes,
again, I know Republic has been long enough to really see the typical
exactly.
for a private funding, a typical holding period could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and you haven't even
Exactly.
been around 5 years. But have there been any successful investments that have gone to completion?
We have had a couple of liquidity events, and as you said, it does take 5 to 7 years typically, but one thing that people don't know is Republic is beyond equity crowdfunding. We also do debt crowdfunding as well as pre-token sales for blockchain projects. And so on the debt side of things, we had a company called Mitte from Germany that actually, they set out to return 1.5x to their Republic investors, and they did that within, I think, 2 weeks of the campaign closing. So that's one liquidity event we can point to. Another liquidity event is where one of our blockchain projects that was planning to do an ICO but wanted to raise a seed round on Republic, a pre-token sale, they actually have since issued their coins to their investors from Republic. So those are kind of two liquidity events we can point to. But as you know, as you said, with equity investing, it does take 5 to 7 years for that IPO or acquisition to kind of be realized. And so we're sort of early days, but there are exciting signs of traction on our platform as
Meaning
there
me oh, traction on the platform, meaning more companies, more
more
investors.
companies that are after, raising a Republic are then raising at a higher valuation after their Republic campaign is another kind of sign of traction that we look at.
Yeah, that's important. So what would you say is the I don't know if you do you measure this? Like, do you have a metric like the Republic companies, here's where they're trading at now with their last valuation?
We're starting to measure this and put together exactly that. The issue that we have is that all of these are private companies and they're not sort of obligated
Right,
to give us that information. And a lot of times they are keeping that information around valuation private for their own reasons, whether it's competitive versus their competitors. They want to sort of hold that tight to their vest. But I think that we're gonna continue to track that in kind of earnest moving forward, and we have done. So I don't have solid numbers for you on that, but just to give you a sense, we've had around 100 companies in the last 2.5 years, raise with us, and as I mentioned, about 30% of those came to us having already raised institutional capital or been through a program such as Techstars or Y Combinator. So just to give you a sense of, like, the quality of these companies that never before could an everyday person invest in a Y Combinator company until now. So I think that's really exciting. But I think what you're getting at is really important because it will continue to allow us to gain the confidence of investors if we kind of have those numbers. So we're working on that. It's hard to piece together. I mean, even amazing databases like PitchBook and Crunchbase don't have perfect numbers on this because
right.
it's private at the end of the day.
Because, I mean, I think the key to for the success for, like, micro lending platforms, where, people invest a few dollars in a situation in Africa and it's a loan, it's like 9% interest. They
Right.
they track what the average interest is because otherwise people won't want to invest, so you'll get so many more investors once you start tracking it, you know this. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly
so
right.
so what's your title there?
So I'm managing director of partnerships and She Works, which is our new female founder community that we acquired. We announced a few weeks ago, and we're really excited about that. And so I lead both partnerships and She Works within the Republic ecosystem.
Okay, and, what types of companies are what makes She Works different other than it's all women?
That's a great question. So She Works is different because, to our knowledge, it's one of the only female founder communities global out there that is on a regular basis bringing together high quality events and opportunities for female founders around the country and the world to meet top investors. And so, for example, last week in San Francisco, we hosted a signature breakfast, which we do a breakfast roundtable with about 30 female founders and a top VC. So we had Stephanie Palmieri, partner at Uncork Capital, one of the preeminent seed investing firms in Silicon Valley, around the table basically mentoring these female founders, and the topic was around how to raise capital from a seed investor. And so I think when it comes to fundraising, it is kind of notoriously opaque for founders. And so to the extent that She Works is working to build community for female founders to both learn from each other, but also be exposed to these top investors and founders who have an established track record and can shed light on this process and kind of debunk a lot of the myths around fundraising. That's something that we're really excited to continue doing. That's what SheWorks has been doing for the past since 2015, since it launched, and we'll continue to do that under the Republic banner. And for us, it's really an opportunity to curate and cultivate a pipeline of female founders, which versus the industry, we've had 40% of the capital on our platform has gone to a female founder, and that's versus around 12% for traditional venture capital industry, the industry. And so we're excited about that, but we want to double down on that by building this pipeline of female
Is that
founders
so
through
that's why
She
you
Works.
bought this community?
And that's a
'Cause
large
I
reason.
haven't heard of many acquisitions that you've done. This is one of the
Yeah, this is
first.
one of them. Yes, exactly.
Uh, okay, I'm gonna pitch you an idea. I think you should do this too.
Okay.
Uh, income share agreements. So I say I'm gonna take all my income for the next 5 years, put it in all my income is gonna go in a lockbox. It's gonna go in James Inc., and I'll own 95% of it, but I wanna sell off 5% of it to the investors on a crowdfunding platform like Republic. So I think that's a good idea. I think more people should do it. I think it's a good way to pay back student loans, for instance. If I can sell off
Hmm.
5% of my future income for the next 10 years to investors, one could pay back debt or student loans or whatever.
That's interesting. So I think one model that we've looked at, kind of similar to what you're talking about, but not as an individual, but as a founder, is revenue share. Almost kind of uh, securing investment in in a founder to then share in their revenues as the revenues grow kind of along the way. And we've explored sort of this revenue share security, but again, not for the individual, but for a founder, for a startup. And so that's one. I think what that speaks to is Republic is equity crowdfunding, and that's what we're known for. But we're much more than that. We've done a tremendous amount of innovation around this landscape, and so as I mentioned, we have the debt crowdfunding, we have equity crowdfunding, we also have pre-token sales for blockchain projects, and this revenue share income agreement that we have for founders that we're exploring. We're trying to find the right candidate for it, but I think that's one area that we're really innovative in. I'm not sure that we'll ever delve into backing an individual person just yet. But I think one thing that we have delved into is thinking through how do we back teams? So how do we allow people to back their favorite soccer teams, for example? And we're working with
Mm.
with a client on doing something like that. So we maybe we'll get there, sort of backing an individual in terms of their income and sharing in their income and allowing them to kind of better manage their debt. I think that's a really exciting idea.
Yeah, because you could imagine, what if you had an entire platform that was just these income sharing agreements?
Right.
Then it's like people buying and selling their shares in different individuals. Like,
Yeah.
let's say someone that just graduated law school and got all A's. I'm just making this up. They might
Yeah,
be a total
definitely.
loser after that, but and they say I want to sell off 5% of my 10-year future income
Yeah.
for $100,000. So they think they're going to make 2 million over the next 10 years. Not unreasonable, and but they will have use for that 100,000 now, like paying down student debt or putting a down payment down on an apartment or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can look at use of funds. It can be an investment just like any other crowdfunded investment, except it's just sort of an individual. So you would invest basically in a company connected to the
Right.
individual's income stream, and so that's how you would do it. But I think that's an interesting idea for a platform.
That could be
That
interesting. And
Republic has the whole infrastructure for it already.
exactly. I think again, I think one of our biggest differentiators is the innovation that we have. We have a team of securities attorneys, former securities attorneys, and currently practicing ones who are innovating within the realm of course, the regulation and making sure that we're always staying compliant. But I think with regulation crowdfunding, there's so much you can do. And we've shown that. And I think a couple things. First of all, that's a topic that's near and dear to my heart as someone who has student debt. And so I think I love this idea of backing an individual that you believe in to essentially participate in their future income. And
Yeah, and you could potentially make more. So I don't know, maybe like if there's a cash out of 10 years later. I don't know
exactly.
how, it could work differently in each situation, but if you buy it as if it's part of a company, and their income is 4 million, or you can make a lot more money.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, you can participate in the upside depending on how much you put down early on and
right.
how much you're willing to invest in that person, and you kind of participate more or less accordingly. I think that's great. We do have an alum of Republic who I'm sure he would love if I shouted him out. His name is Justin Potts, and he is starting a company called, I believe, Evenify, that's working on income share agreements for students. So
Ah,
yeah, maybe he's someone else that you can bring on. He's an alum of Republics, and we're huge supporters of him, so we're excited to see him on his journey.
so
But I think yeah.
how did you end up at Republic?
So it's a great question. I started my career on Wall Street and, spent some
What were you
time.
doing on Wall Street?
So I was working, at larger firms, including Credit Suisse and BlackRock, in sort of a business analytics, and I was a sell side research analyst at Credit Suisse covering U.S. asset manager stocks, and kind of worked on Wall Street, and then left kind of larger firms to work for a smaller kind of merchant bank. And in that process, I was able to help them launch their first investment vehicle, which brought me to Sub-Saharan Africa. And
Were they were launching a fund that invested in
exactly.
African companies?
Exactly. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, and so through that process, I was kind of exposed to these high growth emerging markets and kind of the strategies they were employing, such as investing in tech, investing in young entrepreneurs, investing in women. So, for example, economies like Nigeria and Rwanda, some of the fastest growing in Africa and really the world, were doubling down on technology. And one stat I like to quote is in Rwanda that they have the highest percent of women in parliament in the world.
Hmm,
And I
I didn't know that.
heard, yeah, it's super interesting. And I heard from the president when I was at a conference kind of doing business there around how he kind of talked about investing as women as a revitalization strategy. Thought that was super interesting, because there's so many stats. If you look at the UN, their website, they talk about women, they reinvest in their families at 90% versus 40% for men. They have very low default on their debt. They're really great investments. They're oftentimes the primary breadwinners. So I was inspired by this and kind of left Wall Street to start a couple of different endeavors. One of them was a consultancy where I was bringing capital to my grandparents' native Puerto Rico and kind of liaising between New York and Puerto Rico. And the other was a nonprofit business accelerator for women owned businesses called Access Latina. But one of my clients, when I was working on the consultancy, someone who was interested in establishing a fund in Puerto Rico at the time was Kamal Ravikant. And I know he's a friend of yours and he speaks very highly of you. And so I kept in touch with Kamal after doing some work for him, brought him down to Puerto Rico. He spoke at the largest finance conference and tech conference at the time in Puerto Rico. I brought him down to keynote to talk about what strategies that Puerto Rico could use from his experience from Silicon Valley and obviously building the tech ecosystem in New York. But fast forward after I ended up going to business school. And when I was in business school, Kamal said to me, "You should really meet one of my investments and friends. I'm an investment in his company, Kendrick Wen of Republic, because he knew my kind of passion for this idea of access to capital, investing in female founders, and also using technology to kind of broaden that reach." And so that's when I met Kendrick in I think February or March of 2018, and have since been working and building with him at Republic.
And do you think eventually companies like Republic, it'll do away with the need for a public stock exchange? Like, why
Hmm.
should we ever have a difference between private and public if private individuals can invest and follow the success of private companies? I get it that private companies are a little less regulated,
Right.
but if you just make that kind of, their choice,
Yeah.
which it is, individuals can decide, well, I don't want to invest in something that's not releasing all the information. So you kind of leave it up to the market how they're going to invest in shares of, you know, companies.
I think that's a great point, and what you're getting at is this idea of why the regulation was even passed in the first place. So, I saw the chairman of the SEC, Jay Clayton, last summer in Nashville talk about this, and he said, "The reason why we passed regulation crowdfunding is because fewer and fewer companies are IPOing." And so, in the past, where retail investors, meaning the everyday person, our grandparents, our parents, anyone kind of walking on the street, the everyday retail investor in the past was able to participate in the wealth generation opportunity when a company IPO'd and they can sort of participate in that journey in the public via the public markets. But now fewer and fewer companies are IPOing. And so that's why they passed regulation crowdfunding to allow for the everyday retail investor to invest in private companies with the idea of these companies could potentially be massive wealth generation opportunities for them if they're getting in now and if they do experience a liquidity event, maybe an acquisition, maybe an IPO, but more often it's an acquisition, a private transaction. And so that's exactly why regulation crowdfunding was passed in 2016. And so I think what you're getting at is this idea of it's so important to create these marketplaces, excuse me, where everyday people can participate in and invest in the companies around them, whether they're private or public, but more often private, whether it's investing in a local coding boot camp that's down the street from them, or their local sort of ice cream shop, or whether it's they want to back a founder that's based in Alaska that's building a really exciting drone technology that they would have never been able to access before until now, which we hosted Amber McDonald, CEO of Indemnis, last year, and she was the highest grossing female founder in Reg CF last year.
So
So
so so it's they invest like, so if I have a company, I put it up on Republic,
yeah,
I get investment, I grow, I can do another round on Republic. I can
yeah,
even do a round where I pay back earlier investors. So it could be almost structured like I'm trading, people are trading shares in my company. So that's
definitely.
potentially possible with the Republic platform. Do you see it growing in that direction where it's almost like trading peer-to-peer shares of private companies?
We do. So we actually recently announced that we launched a product called the Republic Note. And what it is it's an engagement opportunity to engage our users and grow our user base. But it essentially is, you know, we one of our intentions with the Republic Note is to eventually potentially tie that to our future revenue streams. And so what the Republic Note is essentially every company that raises on Republic, we own a 2% equity stake in as part of our fees. And the Republic Note represents a small piece of equity in every company that raised with us. It's almost like an
That's
index.
a great idea because then you could make that Republic note go public on the stock exchange, so people could
Yes,
trade the whole index.
that's one great idea, and we're thinking about that
Or
very
and then
strongly.
and then as you get more and more volume of companies, you can do it by sector, by industry. So you could do it
Exactly.
as debt, you could do it as equity.
Absolutely. So we're leveraging the blockchain to do so. We're gonna be
You
building
don't
on s
need to leverage. By the way, as much as a fan I am of
yeah,
Bitcoin and blockchain, I'm a huge fan. Whenever I hear we're leveraging the blockchain to do this, you don't technically need the blockchain to do it.
yeah.
So,
I
but
think it just makes things easier in terms of, transactions, but I think
is that because it's just so, as opposed to being, kind of an escrow in a lawyer's office, it's all held on the
it's using
blockchain?
technology, and I think also what our vision is for, as you were alluding to, is for our users to be able to trade their ownership between rounds. Because as you know, obviously, when a startup raises private capital, there's no liquidity in your ownership interest until they're raising the next round, or now they're more and more secondary markets, definitely, but usually there's not a lot of liquidity there. And so leveraging the blockchain, our thought is we essentially can have our users, sort of potentially selling their interest in between rounds and also buying interest in other companies that they're interested in, basically creating liquidity for
Well, what
them.
what you can do is one strategy is, let's say you have 200 companies that are raising money. Let's say I invest in, let's say I think I'm smart and I invest in the best 20. I
Right.
could have those 20 and then I can sell Republic notes to hedge myself, that I think that because I think there's going to be a spread between the best 20 and the bottom 180. So I could do that as a hedging strategy.
Exactly. I think that's where we're going. That's the vision. And we're working really hard on that. We have a team of securities attorneys, as I mentioned, that's looking through how we can get this done compliantly, working with the regulators. And so, but I think that's kind of the future of where we're going to not only is it great for our platform because it'll increase engagement, because now, your money's not locked up for 7 years until there's a liquidity event. You can change your mind and say, well, actually, I was excited about this startup, but I'm actually more excited about another startup. I'm gonna sell my ownership in that and buy it in another one. And so this kind of marketplace is in terms of trading in sort of equity ownership is where we're going. And the Republic Note is sort of just the beginning phases of that.
Well, I think Republic is such a creative company in the space. I've known
Thank
them
you.
since they've started. I think it's a way for A, companies to get funded, B, everyday investors to get involved. I think all the gains in investing happen I know this from my own experience. All the gains in investing happen if you can invest when companies are still private, because now companies are going public at such a late stage.
Right.
All the juice has been squeezed out of
If at
them,
all, yeah.
and I think Republic's the only platform doing this. It must be is it a you must be having fun?
Yes, it's
So
been an amazing journey. Over a year and a half I've been at Republic, and I think I agree. I think one of the things that I love about the company is the innovation, the creativity, and the vision that Kendrick Nguyen, our CEO, has as it relates to just thinking next level. Exactly the ideas that you threw out. You guys should sit down and oh, actually, I think
we
you
have,
already have.
yeah.
Oh, that's why. But anyway, I think that's where he's thinking. I think versus the industry that is really just focused on this one kind of opportunity of just purely equity crowdfunding. Republic is doing so much more. We're really building an ecosystem, so that's been very exciting.
Well, thanks so much, Bianca.
Thank you.
Bianca
Thank you, James.
Caban, right?
Yes.
And thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us yet more about Republic. I think, which is such an exciting platform for entrepreneurs and investors. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. We'll be back anytime you want us to.
Excellent.
Thanks, James.